Welcome back into another episode of Making the Leap. We're so glad that you're here with us today. We've got a great woman here today to have you listen in on, for us to have a conversation with. Her name is Dr. Greene.
How about this book title? You ready?
I know.
Please teach me like I'm a boy. Hello. I bet that book title gets her in trouble. Please teach me like I'm a boy. This has been sort of a boy-centric month.
It kind of has,
and but on purpose, really, because I think, I'll just speak as a guy, it feels like education generally, the subject is a predominantly female subject.
I
Does that make
agree.
sense?
I do, but I was also going to say, I also think right now, I think it's very important to focus on boys and girls because we are being told there's no such thing anymore.
Right.
And so I do think that there is something about not only acknowledging, yes, there is, number one, but they're different. Boys are different. Think about how many times that we had a house full of little boys zooming around and Nerf guns going, we've got food being consumed, they're yelling, they're loud because they're just boys. They're not troublemakers. They're not, they're rambunctious. They're adventurous. They want to, take a stick and make it a sword. That is in their DNA. And I think
we learned about this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, when we were talking with Matt Bedreau, this is something that is important in an era where we are being told that doesn't even matter anymore. That you can just pick and choose, but you really cannot. So I love having her in. If you are listening right now, we always appreciate, before we go any further, I don't want to forget, we appreciate the 5-star reviews. If you're wherever you're listening to the podcast, any kind of contact that you want to make with us, we can, we'll email, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of those are venues to go ahead and reach us. But we're definitely excited to bring kind of a varied point of view within these episodes, not while we are talking about Christian education. And I think it is incredibly important to keep talking about Christian education. I do think there is a lot to be said for the different ways education can happen.
This is very specifically Christian education. With Matt a couple of weeks ago, we talked about boys and a focus on boys, not necessarily Christian. This conversation is going to focus on a Christian education for boys. And I'll pat myself on the back. In this conversation, I asked a question that I thought was going to be really stupid, and it ended up being something that I really enjoyed the answer to.
Which I think is what we all need to be doing, right? We need to be asking those questions. So I am very proud of you also. I thought that was good.
I think you'll enjoy this conversation with Dr. Greene. I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Greene back, I guess tail end of last year. Her book was a fascinating thing to me called Please Teach Me Like I'm a Boy. I went, hello, what is this? So I said you would be perfect for our Making the Leap podcast, and so she was good enough to come back and talk with us both, Dr. Vermelle Greene. Dr. Greene, great to have you back, and a Happy New Year to you.
Oh, and same to you, Chris. Thank you for having me back. With joy.
Absolutely. We're so glad to talk with you. This has been a topic that I actually was listening to Chris when he was interviewing you last year for his podcast. And I was sitting there thinking, I would like to talk to this lady ASAP. And then he messaged me right after and said, I think I've got a really good guest. So I'm super excited for this opportunity today. Thank you for your time.
So let's just jump right in, Dr. Greene. You wrote the book specifically. We're the parents of two boys, 18 and 17 years old. And so we know a thing or two about teenage boys and how they're different and how they learn different. We also have a 14-year-old daughter. So let's talk about boys. We've actually done an interview a couple of weeks ago on boys specifically, too. I don't know, in this whole kind of education revolution that we're in the middle of right now, where do you think boys fit into it all? Or have we spent enough time specifically talking about them, do you think?
No, we do not. And it's sad, and it's very frustrating because when I hear about different problems that schools are suffering, be it discipline problems or poor test grades or, just a terrible class environment, I keep thinking to myself, why aren't you looking at the root problem? And the root problem, unfortunately, is that many of our boys are not being taught the way that they learn best. And I'm speaking in generalities. There are some boys who are thriving, but a lot of our boys are not. And what happens is that when boys aren't being successful, if they feel that the school is, kind of biased towards the girls, sometimes they will take the tendency to kind of act out. So they're causing the problems, just counting down the days when they can finally say goodbye, I'm quitting, I'm leaving, I'm going to get a job, even though most 17 or 18-year-olds can't get a very good job that's going to pay their way in this life at that point. But they are just aching to get out of the environment that has made them so unhappy, many of our boys. And then we wonder, why aren't there more men teachers? Well, what man is going to want to spend, 12, 13 years of his life in an environment where he felt that he wasn't understood, where he didn't feel the kind of success that he wanted? What man then is going to turn around as an adult and say, well, I'm going to spend the rest of my adult career life in a school? Well, not too many men are going to do that, and especially for our boys of color. And as a Black woman, I'm really concerned that many of our Black boys are doing even more poorly among the boys. So boys underperforming the girls, and of the boys, the bottom of that performance are our Black boys.
You have a long history in education yourself. Can you share a little bit about that for our listeners?
Surely. I started teaching in 1974.
Okay.
So if you're really good in math.
I'm good, because that's close to, yeah. I'm good at that.
Okay, I guess I better raise that number, though. My son is in his 40s, so. But when I started teaching, I started out in high school. I taught high school biology. And the thing that struck me the most was that many of the kids couldn't read. They would look at my words, they'd come across in biology like, hermaphroditic or chordata or schizomimesis. And they look at it and they would say, what is that? I said, well, sound it out. And they would say, what? What does that mean?
Oh.
This was in 1974, Dr. Greene?
1974. Yeah.
Wow.
So you've noticed that problem for that long. I mean, this is not like 1990 something.
Right.
This was decades ago you noticed this.
No, please, yes. When they started changing the way that children were taught to read, that really started in the 1950s. When I started first grade, I didn't start kindergarten because I already knew how to read. My grandmother, with her 8th grade education, had taught me how to read. She taught me how to read the way she had learned, which was with phonics. So when I went to school, they were talking about see Dick run, run Dick, see Jane run. And I'm like, what? Where are the down books? What is it? See Jane run. They were teaching the children what's called whole language.
Right.
And they learned how to read, or they tried to teach them how to read through repetition, by saying the same word over and over again. So no longer were the children expected to sound out the words. That R-U-N, was run. It was just, you look at the whole word, run.
You know what that brings to mind? Forgive the reference, but it brings to mind that classic scene in Driving Miss Daisy, when she's teaching her driver to read for the first time. She was a teacher in that movie, if memory serves. And I remember distinctly when she said to her driver, it's ridiculous, anybody can read. And that's exactly how she, in the movie, was teaching Morgan Freeman to read, the character in the film, right? That's exactly, that's how it used to be done, the way your grandmother taught you. And we've gotten away from that, you're saying.
We got away from that, and it really hurt our boys. Girls were able to kind of, make their way through because the female brain has a strength when it comes to the language arts. The male brain processes language on just one side. The female brain processes language on both sides of the brain. So when that little boy who starts school, usually at 5 years old, or sometimes just at 5, he just turned 5, and they're trying to teach them or teach the children how to read, how to write, even how to sit down and cross their legs and, crisscross applesauce and sit on the carpet and listen to the story. Those little boys, they're not baked yet. They're not ready for, the structure of school. They want to play. But the girls are able to adapt more readily than the boys. Teachers tend to teach the way we learn, which is a lot of reading and writing and stories and talking and that kind of thing. But boys are wired for movement. So getting back to how I started, so in high school, I didn't realize that children, and boys included, weren't being taught how to read. It wasn't until I was at the elementary school and sat in on a first grade reading class and heard the teacher say, okay, class, look at that word. You don't know what that word is? Well, look at the first letter. Look at the last letter. Look at the picture. Can you guess what that word is? And I thought to myself, can you guess what that word is? What is that? I said, no wonder the babies can't read. And then because I'd never been in elementary school before. As an administrator, I had a nice view of the whole program. And I would walk down the halls, I looked into the special education classes, most of them boys. And in our area, right outside D.C., most little black boys. And I walked past the talented and gifted classes, majority girls. Then I looked at some students that I had assigned to in-school suspension for being little boo-boo bears. And they had them lined up against the wall, getting ready to take them in her classroom, the coordinator of the in-school suspension center. And I saw boy, 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 girl, boy, 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 girl, and began to say, wait a minute, what's wrong with our boys? They're not stupid. Why is it that our boys are packed out in the special ed classes and not in the talented and gifted classes? So this was late in my career. I had been in education by that time close to about 25 years. And when I finally retired, I had done some research, and I read a book by Vermelle Greene that said boys and girls learn differently. And my ears perked up. I said, what? Boys and girls learn differently? Boys' brains different? What? No one had ever told me that. In all those years, as an administrator, as a teacher, and all the professional development they send you to, and even in my undergrad training, no one ever said that the way that a little boy learns is different from the way that a girl learns. But then I had like an epiphany, and I would say, wow, that's why he did this. That's why she couldn't. That's why he couldn't. And I'm thinking, my goodness, why aren't we doing this in our schools? So when I retired, I knew my pastor wanted to start a school. So I went to him with all these statistics about how our boys were failing. And he had a real heart for men and their men's issues. So when I told him, how about a school just for boys, he got excited. He said, let's do it. And I said, let's go for it. So we started the day before 9/11, September 10th.
Oh my gosh.
Oh
I had
gosh.
one student.
One.
One kindergarten student. One student. But after about 6 months, my enrollment doubled. I've then had two.
But that's how you grow, right? That's how you start. And if you're helping one, if you're helping two, that's phenomenal.
Dr. Greene, what of the dynamic of boys and girls separated in schools? Our daughter attends a private Christian school with boys, but I still wonder, not to knock the school. It's no. I think they're doing the best they can, but I still wonder if maybe we ought to pull back and think harder about, in any kind of private setting. You still got the same issues, don't you? Gender's learning differently.
You sure do. It's a different dynamic. With my boys, first of all, if you were to come into my school, the first thing you would notice that, gosh, this is awfully loud. So much noise. Boys
they make noise.
And they're running around, they're punching each other, and they're jumping around, whatever. And it was so funny. Our pastor's wife would come into our area every once in a while. She's like, Vermelle, you need to get these boys under control. I said, they are under control. What's the matter? They're fine. Wait a minute. Look at those two over there. Are they fighting? I said, no, they're not fighting. They're just saying hello. That's just how boys bond.
And that really involves kind of a retraining, I think, right, of people's brains. Because when I was teaching, actually, I laughed when you said Michael Gurian, because I do know that name. That we read his books. We did book studies on him. I think we even had him in our district talking to us. And it was kind of that, I don't want to call it a buzzword, but it definitely was a shift in my thinking, because I had some classes that were heavily boys, and man, they were a different class for me teaching language arts than my class that was a mixed boy-girl, pretty evenly spaced. So that's a lot.
To that point, Dr. Greene, then I'll ask, can you successfully run a school of mixed gender children, or is it optimal that they be separated in your view?
Single-sex education is not for everyone, not for every child. Even in our school, there were some boys that, they just couldn't make it because of the dynamic. One thing with our boys, we were very strict, because with boys, they need the structure. They don't need their teacher coming in saying, oh, okay, I wonder what we're going to do today. Oh, we did that yesterday. Let's not do that. No, they need structure. They need schedule. They need to do the same thing every day. The male brain needs structure. That's why men are drawn to the military. Very structured environment. You're told when to eat, when to march, when to parade, and so the male brain, without that structure, they may not know exactly what to do. And if he doesn't know what to do, then he'll just kind of do his own thing. And so when you have little boys who need that structure, and you put them in with a bunch of girls who many times already are able to shift and make changes and multitask and this kind of thing, sometimes he just can't make it. And he becomes sometimes a behavior problem, because there's just too much shifting going on and disorganization. But we had to help our boys to be disorganized. No, help them to be disorganized. Oh, mercy. We had to help them to be organized, to, where's your homework? Let's put your homework away. Where's your book bag? Let's put it in your book bag. No, don't stick it in your pocket. You got to fold it up and put it in your folder. So it took a lot of hand holding. So not only is it not for all boys, but it's not for all teachers as well.
I was going to say, this takes, I think, a teacher that is willing to think outside what the norm is for how they're taught. I know how I was taught as a teacher, and you kind of have to go back and undo some of those best practices, because they really aren't always best practice, because one size does not fit all the time.
You're exactly right, Christine. That's one thing we had to do from the very start. We had to get our teachers thinking outside the box, but also to kind of throw away their preconceptions about how to teach school. We didn't want them to stand up at the front of the class and lecture all day. We wanted to not only insert movement into their instruction, but to give the boys breaks. So every 30 minutes, we wanted them to take a strong break. For the younger boys, it was every 15 minutes. Give them instruction, give them a brain break. We had 2 recesses every day. We were K-8, even for the 8th graders. I tell you, the 8th grade boys loved it. So we had recess in the morning, had a recess in the afternoon after lunch. We had a lot of movement instilled in the classes. We had to make sure that we chose the correct curricula, because the current curriculum that we wanted to use, the ABECA, which is very Christ-centered, but it didn't lend itself that well to the way that a boy learns. Now, some boys will thrive with ABECA. I love ABECA, especially when it came to phonics. So we used it in the early grades, but in the upper grades, not so much. So we had to kind of look around for curricula that were more boy-friendly.
Dr. Greene, I was going to ask you, you brought up Christian education specifically. Have you found that, this may seem like a strange question, I'm sure it's probably silly, but do boys receive Christian education differently than girls too? I mean, or is it just the same as any other, science, math, English? Do you teach the faith differently to boys than girls, do you think?
I think it should be. There's a book by the Reverend Tim Wright. I can't remember the title, but the subtitle is "Stopping the Exodus of Boys from Your Ministries." And it talked about the way that boys learn and how Christ is presented. Christ was no wimp. He was no wuss. He was strong. He was mighty. And
Amen.
boys need to realize that he was a hero. He stood up to bullies. He was strong. He fought for the least of them. Also, the fact that oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. I get so excited when I talk about it. When it comes to the language of salvation, men don't usually talk about having relationships with each other. Hey man, I want to have a relationship with you. Men don't really talk like that. And so when we present it to boys, we talk about it more about, hey, God, Jesus wants you on his team. Boys understand that, the camaraderie that comes with a team. Not so much the girly, feely kinds of stuff. No, they need that action part of Jesus, the action part, the doing part of salvation. He needs you to be on his team. He needs you to come and go out and help other people. So with boys, they need to know that it's something that they can do, not just necessarily something that they feel.
Amen. I love that. I'm glad I asked that question. I thought it was a bad question, and it turned out a great one. I'm glad I asked it.
Well, and I think isn't that really what a lot of it boils down to is allowing, whether it's Chris, who's he's a boy, but allowing him or any other student really to ask those questions and to figure out how something applies to them and encouraging them along those lines, which again I don't think boys are encouraged in a classroom.
Let's tell some hard truths about our own situation,
Yeah.
Dr. Greene. We have an 18-year-old son. He's about to graduate, and I mean, we're dragging him across the finish line, kicking and screaming, knowing all we know now. I wished I'd known Dr. Greene, 18 years ago. But if I were to be truthful with you, I know that the kid is extraordinarily bright and perfectly capable. He's just been so beaten down by feeling like a failure, and he's kind of embarrassed and bashful about the fact that he's trucking along, and then he hit a certain roadblock where he just he felt silly to ask questions. He felt like he was a dope for not getting it, and I can't help but think if he knew Dr. Greene and was in a class full of boys that his entire life would have been different.
Well, and sitting in a classroom hour after hour after hour without the 30-minute break or, going for a break after 30 minutes without 2 recesses. I taught middle school, and I can't tell you how often I invented any excuse to get those kids outside so that they could at least get sunlight, get air, move, get around, that kind of thing. And so we see our son now, kind of having those after effects. And I do feel like we kind of went to battle for him maybe a little bit more than some teachers or parents would like, because I kept thinking, but you've got a smart kid sitting here and he's not fitting the way you're teaching. And isn't this kind of a problem? And now here we are.
Yeah, we know now far too late. I mean, but that's why we're doing this project now, and why we're so glad to be working with the Herzog Foundation and talking to people like you. We want to encourage people who have younger kids not to do the same. I mean, we love our son, and he's going to be a great kid. But, I wish if we could rewind time, we would have done it differently is the point.
Oh, you and me both. I tell you, my son, he's in his 40s now, and I think back on, had I known a lot of what I know now, I would have caused him a lot less angst, when...
Yes.
When his teacher assigned him, 40 long division problems. He went to a Christian school too. I remember her name. Oh my goodness. I had to pray for her. But every day. And we would be up until 10, 11 o'clock at night trying to do these division problems. And I would go to her and say, it's too much. And she would look at the other children and say, oh, well, no, they can do it.
But they're doing it.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to see it. Then when they use the curriculum the ACE curriculum, Accelerated Christian Education Curriculum. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where the students, it's basically individualized instruction, in a classroom atmosphere. Some students, it was wonderful. They did marvelously.
Right.
But my son and many of the boys, you put him in a study carrel, you give him a book, and you say, okay, finish this. I'll see you in an hour.
Right. And then when what you just said, now let's change it out from a book. Now it's a computer in a study carrel, or sitting how they sat through COVID and coming out of it. Now I think that adds 10 times the problem when you talk about boys, or girls too. But when you talk about asking them to do what their minds and bodies are not ready for, that's just so problematic.
You bring up COVID, Dr. Greene. How did your boys' school handle COVID?
Well, our school closed approximately 8 years ago. We closed in 2015. Finances caught up to us.
Sure.
A lot of our boys were the sons of single moms, and we really couldn't charge the tuition that it would take to keep a school running. And we were being a financial drain on the church, and people would ask me, why don't you become a charter school? I said, no, a charter school is public. I want to be able to be boldly Christian. I want to be able to teach the word, teach the Bible, and I can't do that. But that's okay, because we were able to touch the lives of our boys for a long time.
Well, amen. And you bring up
amazing.
something very important. We've done previous episodes on churches partnering with schools or starting Christian schools. What would you say about that, having gone through that experience? And is there still opportunity for that to happen in maybe some areas that struggle financially, or is that just not possible financially? How do you see it?
Our problem, I shouldn't say our problem, but the problem was Vermelle Greene. I find it very hard to ask for money.
Okay.
Whenever I would tell someone about our school, they would get excited. Because I tell you, at the time that we opened, we were the only Christian school, K-8 Christian school for boys in our state. Wow. And I found that hard, but I'd gone to the State Department of Education. I wanted to visit another school, so I can take some notes. And they said there are no others. There's some Catholic schools for boys and some secular schools for boys, but no Christian school for boys, kindergarten to grade 8. So people and businesses were excited, but it takes almost a full-time fundraising developer to go out and knock on doors and stroke the donors and go through. And I was teaching, I was the principal, so I had like 2 hats already, and I just couldn't. But God's timing is best.
Yes.
What happened when the school closed after 14 years, what that allowed me to do is to go out and tell other people, especially Christian schools and Christian school teachers, about boy-girl learning differences. Because I said, many a day, I said, the only way they'll get me out of this school is feet first. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to close the school.
Well, you've written this beautiful book,
yeah.
and you're here with us today. And one of the things with the Herzog Foundation that underwrites our podcast, that is exactly what the Herzog Foundation is built to do, Dr. Greene, is to help Christian schools not only build and grow from a curriculum point of view, but that is a critical piece that you've just described, and the Herzog folks understand that. So they teach seminars here in the headquarters as to how to help fundraise and keep a school growing, because they understand that's also a key part of it.
And they also are when you said there wasn't another school in the state of Maryland, that is another thing that they're doing within their teacher toolbox realm, is partnering up a school like yours, for example. Maybe it's not in Maryland, but maybe there's one out in Texas, or maybe there's one, out, I don't know, in Utah. So they partner schools up, so you have that mentor school to be asking questions of and saying, how are you doing this? Because I agree, there probably aren't a lot of Christian K-8 schools. I bet there's probably not a ton of high schools specifically for boys. Yeah. And so I think that's what is so amazing with these, like Herzog, what they're doing. And I wish they'd been around.
Yeah. In
For
fact,
you.
we'd
That
love to
would have
have
been
you here
lovely.
one of these days to talk with folks about how you did it, too, because we could learn a lot. What would you say to churches? When I love that you said your pastor embraced this. Not all pastors do. We've done previous shows about churches that seem a little hesitant sometimes to partner to develop a school. The 14 years you talk about, was it a fruitful venture? Were you all glad you did it?
I was, because I could see the changes in the lives of our boys. We were a financial drain on the church, and our church was in the midst of a building program as well. So they were trying to build a new facility, a new sanctuary, and there we were taking up the basement of the sanctuary, the current sanctuary. So, the pastor wanted us to make it, but we were being a drain. And then when we had those single moms, many of them couldn't pay the tuition that we did charge, which was minimal.
Right.
So we were kind of underwritten, and our teachers, bless their hearts, they were almost paying us to work there. Because, you factor in their transportation and, their child care and this kind of thing.
So could I get into politics for a minute? You ready for some politics? What if in Maryland, those mothers were able to take the tax dollars that Maryland spends on per pupil in Maryland and reallocate that to your school instead? What if that existed? Would that have changed the course of everything?
Oh, absolutely. We could have packed out the place. In fact, at one point, we were able to get another building. And the building had, close to about 150 student capacity. But we weren't able to stay there again because of finances. So we had to return back to the church and the small facilities there. But we could have packed out that school. Absolutely.
And this is what I mean.
Right.
Parents that have the ability to take their tax dollars and walk across the street, leave the school they're in, and apply it to the school of their choice, that's the game changer, Dr. Greene, for every state that's doing it. Most aren't yet.
It absolutely
And
is.
especially...
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was going to say, especially for the demographic, when you're talking about a single parent who's not having to go out and get the second or the third job to pay that tuition, even if it is a nominal amount, that using those tax dollars, I think, is such a big piece of it versus I'm already a single mom. I'm already doing the job of two people. Now I have to take a third job and a fourth job in order to send my child to this school.
Yeah, I don't know what Arizona,
Right.
and I want you to speak to this, Dr. Greene, but I'll say I don't know what Maryland spends per student, but I know in Arizona, you're talking about let's call it $6,000. Right. And I bet even today in Maryland, if every parent could come to the table with at least $6,000 a year, that's a great start. Yes?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the per pupil spending in Maryland is probably closer to about $17,000.
Right. It's usually a lot higher.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
What could you do with even half of that, right?
Oh my! It would have worked wonders. It would have worked wonders.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, many of those parents who are trapped in schools are single moms, and many of our African American moms and children as well, who have no choice, but to stay in schools. Some of them are underperforming, not meeting the needs of their sons. They're getting phone calls every day. Johnny won't sit still. Johnny doesn't do this. He won't do his homework. He's not cooperative, over and over and over again. And those parents, they have no choice. They're trapped, many parents. Those that do have resources will usually take their children and put them in private school, either private secular school or private Christian school, because the monopoly that the public schools have, it's just not there.
The book is called Please Teach Me Like I'm a Boy. Dr. Greene, you're such a blessing. I just, you radiate encouragement and the love of the Lord. I have just so loved getting to know you. Yeah. I hope we can have you back on the show.
Oh, please. I would run back. Thank you.
Well, have a great 2023, and we'll certainly have you back.
Thank you.
All right. You too. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. I am glad I had that opportunity. I know I told her already when we were talking with her, but when I was listening to you talk with her, I just thought, well, I just kind of want to like tuck her in my pocket and bring her along with me for the ride in life right now.
Some people that I encounter just over the phone like that. I've not met her in person. I don't even know what she looks like. I couldn't pick her out of a lineup. And there are just times where you want to reach through the phone and hug somebody. There's a warmth and a decency and a humanity and a love for the Lord in that lady. You can just feel it. She radiates it. She loves children. She loves boys. She loves the Lord. It's just all good. You wish there were a trillion Vermelle Greenes.
And speaking real truth, speaking honestly and openly about things like African American students that are sitting in these failing schools, or that are sitting in schools that are doing well and they're failing. You can't always separate those two.
I mean, that's the I didn't know how that story was going to end. And I was brokenhearted to hear that that's how that school closed because financially it couldn't make it. But that is the truth, and that's that. This isn't a political podcast, but that's why I brought politics up, because that's what the politics of today has done to people like Dr. Greene's school. It's needless. You could have so many, 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 many more schools like Dr. Greene's if government didn't get in the way and screw it up and take the opportunity away. And that's what they've done. They've taken the opportunity away. Kids need opportunities. Parents need opportunities to shop educational choice for their kids.
I think it's a phenomenal avenue that we're going to keep going down, I think, repeatedly. We already have gone down it a bit. We've been to some different events where we've heard people speaking about what these tax dollars would do in their specific areas. And she's a prime example. And I think I want to hold on to that, because when you hear that, our school closed, but she was very honest too. It wasn't just tax dollars. I think some of it, when she said, she goes, well, the problem was Vermelle Greene. Like, I kind of wanted to laugh, but she said
the church was asking. There's finances to be managed. I mean, you have to be financially solvent as a church, and you got to be ready to make that connect. I mean, so there's a lot. Right. It's not purely politics, but
it's a lot to do. It's a lot to be a teacher, a parent, an administrator, then go fundraise and go ask for money, bring it in a way that you don't just need $100.
You have to learn. If you're going to launch a school, you have to learn how to ask for money. And that is like politics. And one of the reasons that I was terrible in politics and never wanted to get into it was you have to be able to sit across the table, and we know some people in professional fundraising. You got to smile and say, I need $1 million, right, and not blink.
No, I sit on a capital campaign for school right now, and that is the part. I mean, that's the job I was asked to do, and it's the job I dislike the most in terms of saying, here is what I need from you. That is so difficult, even when you know you're being called to do it, you're on the right track, you're doing the right thing. It doesn't make it any easier. So I appreciated her honesty in addressing the various facets that are problematic when you have a school. And thank goodness for Herzog Foundation doing what they're doing and growing their program and growing what they are offering to schools.
Yeah, so if you're hearing this and you're going, I know that story, or that's a familiar story, or that's why we don't do this, the Herzog Foundation is very specifically dedicated to helping people like Dr. Greene and her school not fall into that trap.
Right.
Of having no finances.
Well, we have next coming up, I believe it's next week, next episode, we do have a couple that we are speaking with who they are going to be starting a school. We've already talked with a few couples. This is a pastor out of a church. They've got curriculum, they've got things in place. And when I called them and talked to them and I said, have you heard of the Herzog Foundation? And they said, well, yes, one of the elders kind of briefly mentioned it. And I said, well, you need to come up here and you need to see it. And then you need to start going online and you need to look and see what they can do to help you and what you can offer as well. I think it's a great, great partnership they're creating here.
Leave us a 5-star review and a written review at Apple iTunes. You scroll all the way down to the bottom of the menu of shows and you can leave 5 stars and write a review. Hope you will. Spotify, 5 stars. We appreciate that too. And always subscribe so you never miss an episode. Hope you'll share it and let folks know about it if you're passionate about it too. And you can contact us through email as well as online social media.
Yeah, so you can send us an email at hello@makingthelleap.podcast.com. Instagram and Facebook are at Making the Leap Podcast. And you can go ahead and contact us there and we will happily respond.
Until next week, we'll see you again right here.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.